welcome to the Country Watch Political Intelligence Briefing Quick Hits, a weekly briefing of hot stories across the world in brief. I'm Denise Youngblood Coleman, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief and Senior International Affairs Analyst at Country Watch. This week, Iran is the featured country. United States President Joe Biden signaled a cautious approach to Iran, saying that he would not lift economic sanctions against that country until it complied with the terms of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, known in simple terms as the Iran nuclear deal. Since the Trump administration's withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA in 2018, the agreement has destabilized. In retaliation to former President Trump's action, Iran violated the agreed-upon limits on uranium enrichment. Now, however, we are seeing some signs of a shift. Specifically, the Biden administration has said that it would accept an invitation from the European Union to re-enter negotiations with Iran and other signatories to the Iran nuclear deal. The statement from the United States Department of State read as follows: the United States would accept an invitation from the European High Representative to attend a meeting of the P5+1 and Iran to discuss a diplomatic way forward on Iran's nuclear program. This move would be the first diplomatic step towards reconstituting P5+1 talks. While there is no guarantee that the JCPOA could be salvaged, and there is certainly no guarantee that Iran would return to compliance with the agreement, there is at least a foundation for diplomacy. For its part, Iran has agreed to extend access by United Nations nuclear inspectors to its nuclear sites for 3 months. The agreement was announced by Rafael Grossi, the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency. In truth, the agreement would provide IAEA inspectors with less access than before, while preventing snap or short notice inspections. These new curtailments appear to be in response to the Biden administration's refusal to comply with completely lifting crippling sanctions on Iran. According to Grossi, there's less access, let's face it, but still we were able to retain the necessary degree of monitoring and verification work. Regardless, the extension for inspectors would allow more time for Washington and Tehran to find a resolution. With Iran's slide into non-compliance, there was increasing alarm over Iran's resumption of prohibited nuclear development activities. In 2019, Iran violated the agreed-upon limit on uranium enrichment. Then in January of this year, Iran announced that it would resume enriching uranium to 20%. While 20% is quite a distance from the 90% purity required for weapons-grade uranium, the move was nonetheless a provocative one. Now let's move on to other news from around the world. In Burma, also known as Myanmar, in the aftermath of the coup d'etat that deposed the elected leadership of that country, hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets in national rallies to demand that the military junta release the elected leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi and President Win Myint. Protesters were unmoved by the military junta's promise to hold early elections and continued to demand the release of Suu Kyi and other members of her National League for Democracy party. Massive crowds of protesters were participating in civil disobedience exercises and risking the hardline response from authorities as they took to the streets. A protest in Mandalay turned bloody and violent when police opened fire using live ammunition on the crowd. The use of live ammunition was also reported elsewhere, leading to the deaths of a handful of people during this period. On February 21st, crowds gathered in the thousands in the capital of Naypyidaw to pay their respects at the funeral of a 19-year-old woman who was killed during demonstrations against the military coup. The deaths of this woman and of other victims represented the imprint of democracy martyrs on the political landscape. Indeed, they were likely to fuel further public outrage and mass resistance. To this end, daily protests were expected to continue, and a nationwide general strike was also anticipated. In Russia, Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, who was poisoned by the Soviet-era toxin Novichok, lost a legal appeal regarding his imprisonment. At the start of February, Navalny was sentenced to prison for 3.5 years for violating the conditions of a suspended sentence for embezzlement. By mid-February, Navalny had lost a legal appeal regarding his imprisonment for breaking the terms of that 2014 suspended sentence. There was a slight reduction in the time to be spent in prison, 6 weeks less than the original sentence, but the court nonetheless upheld his penalty. As such, Navalny would be compelled to finish his sentence at a penal colony. In some tragic news of the day, the Italian ambassador was killed in an ambush on a convoy while traveling in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. According to the Italian Foreign Ministry, Luca Anastasio, Italy's ambassador to the DRC since 2017, a bodyguard and their driver were all killed as they traveled from Goma in the eastern regional capital of DRC to visit a World Food Programme school project in Rutshuru. According to the North Kivu government, the United Nations convoy was hijacked and the assailants took the victims into the bush. The military and Virunga National Park guards rendered assistance, resulting in an exchange of fire. That altercation resulted with the assailants opening fire on the ambassador, who died from his injuries. The area of central DRC is particularly volatile and rife with attacks from various rebel and extremist groups. Indeed, more than 2,000 civilians were killed in eastern Congo DRC in 2020 alone, and over 5.2 million people have been forced to flee the violence as rebel and extremist groups battle for control in the mineral-rich Congo DRC. The particular rationale for the assassination of the ambassador was unknown at the time of writing. Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio said the circumstances of this brutal attack are still unclear, and no effort will be spared to shed light on what happened. Meanwhile, Italian President Sergio Mattarella and Premier Mario Draghi also expressed their condolences. Turning to Uganda, the International Criminal Court of the United Nations convicted child soldier turned Lord's Resistance Army commander Dominic Ongwen of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Going back to 2004, the ICC commenced a war crimes investigation into the atrocities committed by the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA. A year later, in 2005, the ICC completed the inquest and issued the indictments of the group's 5 senior leaders. In 2016, Ongwen became the first LRA commander to face trial, and now in 2021, he was convicted for the litany of heinous war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the LRA. According to the ICC, Ongwen's crimes included rape, sexual slavery, forced pregnancy, and I quote, outrages upon personal dignity of girls and women, murder, torture, enslavement of civilians, the pillaging of property, and the conscription of children under the age of 15 in order to perpetuate further violence. After announcing its guilty verdict, the ICC scheduled a sentencing hearing for April. It would be seen if Ongwen would be subject to a prison sentence of up to 30 years, along with victims' reparations. There's no death penalty. However, the court could determine that the crimes merit exceptional circumstances and thus a lifetime prison sentence. I'd like to point out that the LRA gained notoriety for its gross violations of human rights, such as rape, forced pregnancy, torture, murder, abduction of children, for the purpose of making them into either child soldiers or sex slaves, and vicious mutilation. Among the LRA's signature heinous acts is the removal of victims' noses, lips, ears, and hands. United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Head Jan Egeland has described the LRA's activities as being akin to the worst form of terrorism in the world. He has also characterized the situation in Central Africa as a horrific humanitarian crisis. In the United States, on the coronavirus front, the country has passed the devastating threshold of 500,000 deaths. On a more positive note, and for the country and for planet Earth, the United States has officially rejoined the Paris Climate Accord. For more information about these and other stories, read my political intelligence briefing and my coronavirus report, both of which are accessible from the front page of the Country Watch website, accessible at www.countrywatch.com. Thank you for your time. Have a great day. And remember that we live in an interconnected world.